And welcome back. New York City Speaker Corey Johnson and the Women's Caucus of the New York City Council approved the preliminary analysis of anonymized and publicly available New York City employee payroll data conducted by the New York City Council. The analysis actually shows several things: significant gender, racial, and ethnic pay disparities in the city's workforce. Also, male employees, they actually roughly average about $4,500 more a year than female employees. The analysis also found that Black city workers average about $7,600 less than white workers, while Asians tend to make $6,500 a year more, I should say less than white employees. Now, here to bring us all up to speed and give us a little bit more about what this actually means and talk about this analysis is Councilmember of New York City District 16 and co-chair of the New York City Council Women's Caucus, Vanessa Gibson. And Councilwoman Gibson, good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Daren. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Let's get right at it. When we look at these statistics, obviously a lot of concern, particularly on the part of women, particularly on the part of minorities. When you took a look at the data and you saw what it actually brought out, give me your result. I mean, your thoughts.
So first and foremost, I was not surprised because I think for women and women of color across the country, you're constantly seeing efforts of pay parity, efforts of gender equity, making sure that we recognize that you should be paid equally for equal work, equal pay for equal work. And this information that we received at the City Council was as per local law 18 of 2019 that was passed by the City Council in late 2018. And essentially it was led by the amazing men and women of CWA, Communication Workers of America, Local 1180. And they came to us years ago and expressed a concern about a majority of their members, African-American women, city workers, not being paid equally. So we worked together with Majority Leader Lori Cumbo, the Women's Caucus, the council members, Speaker Corey Johnson, and we were able to pass legislation that mandated that the administration put forth data, payroll data on all 300,000 workers in New York City, data broken down by race, ethnicity, as well as gender. And what we ultimately saw, as you said in your opening, that there is a huge level of pay disparities between African-American, Latino, and Asian American city workers compared to their white male counterparts. And what does it say to us as a city? It says that if you are a white man in New York City, you will make more than your counterparts. And it doesn't speak to years of service. It doesn't speak to level of education. And once we get that data in early 2021, I'm sure we will see even more disparities with African-American, Latino, and Asian workers with more years of experience, more levels of education, and still not receiving equal pay.
Well, I mean, we can't say the handwriting was on the wall. Everybody actually knew exactly what the numbers would actually show. There are some people who actually come back and say, I'm a little bit surprised by this. I guess the main question people have is, where do you go from here? Given the fact that we've got the data, given the fact that we've got these numbers, where can we go to kind of make this pivot?
Right. So where do we go from here? We have an administration that has 1 year left, right? I think it sets the tone and it's a platform agenda to move forward. I think it's really going to highlight a lot of discrepancies we have in the city's workforce. So what I think we should obviously do is legislation is always a great way to codify measures into local law, but we also have to put this into practical life. As we recruit workers for the city's workforce, as we go through the civil service exam process, we have to make sure that there are policies in place that mandate equal pay for equal work, no matter what color you are, no matter what your gender is, and make sure that in every single agency, there's a level of oversight. And that oversight comes from the administration, from the mayor, the deputy mayors, the first deputy, and the entire team led obviously by the mayor. So I believe that this is going to be a fundamental change across our city for the new administration that comes in City Hall, the majority of new council members that will go to City Hall. It really does have to send a message, because not only are we fighting for current city workers, but we're also fighting for the future city workers who are young college graduates that will be coming back home with college debt that have an expectation. I've worked really hard. I've got my bachelor's, my master's degree, and you're telling me because I'm a Black woman, I'm an Asian woman, I'm Latina, that I can't make the same as my white male counterpart. I think it's unacceptable. I think it's a level of disrespect. When you look at a lot of the civil service workers and the essential workers that have been working during the pandemic. So I think legislation is obviously the way to go. But we also want to make sure that we put a level of oversight from the mayor's office to make sure that every agency is following the rules.
Yeah. When we talk about seeing it get this far, obviously there could be a lot of reasons for why things actually got this far. But if I'm a person that's actually working, I know that sometimes civil service is sometimes a barrier. And I know you've heard that before, that sometimes the civil service jobs could actually be a barrier. Is there anything that can be done to help make civil service more palatable for people to be able to access jobs, particularly in those communities of color?
Absolutely. One thing we have to do with civil service exams is we have to do more advertisement, more promotion, and more recruitment. Many of the civil service exams are put on notice online in terms of just making it more accessible in that way. But a lot of folks don't really know about how to become a civil servant worker, how to join the city's workforce. So just like we had this fight a few years ago with school crossing guards, with not having them have to go to the local precinct to apply for a school crossing guard position, but we have to do better recruitment, whether it's 311, job fairs. We have to really, really mobilize an aggressive campaign across all neighborhoods, particularly marginalized communities of color that historically have not been able to get a foot in the door when it comes to becoming a civil service. What we also have to do is we have to have more sessions that provide tutorial and assistance for how to pass the exam, because that's another barrier in how we can't get in. A lot of these positions are civil servants positions, and you have to take an exam. And so if you're not prepared, I think it just further highlights the larger issue that we have around recruitment in communities of color with men and women of color, and really making sure that the city's workforce is always reflective of the city that it serves.
Yeah. When we talk about African Americans and people and those in communities of color, a lot of challenges to have to wade through, a lot of challenges having to, deal with. Talk about your district in particular. How do you get the message out to your district? How do you really say to them, this is what we found out, and then make them aware, and then also that call to action, if you will?
Right. So we do a number of different communication channels, whether it's social media, our newsletters that we mail directly to our constituents, a lot of TV, public access television, of course, BronxNet, because it's really important to meet and reach people where they are. Advocacy we do at local houses of worship, community centers, the local stores and merchants associations. A lot of that we've not been able to do in the capacity that we used to because of COVID, because you're just not able to get people in those large settings anymore. But that shouldn't stop us from the work we have to do. The call to action is that pay parity is a priority that we always strive for. It is not acceptable, no matter what gender, what race, what nationality you identify as, you have an expectation to be paid equally for your work. And we often have these days of recognition where we recognize, Black equal pay day, Black women equal pay day, Latina equal pay day, where we come and we recognize the disparities, but we also talk about solutions to the problem. Organizations like PowHer and many other women's groups that do this work every single day. They push legislative bodies to pass legislation to address pay parity, to say you cannot discriminate on someone, you cannot pay them differently because they bring something different to the table. Like if you are in a certain title, everyone in that title should be paid at the same amount. And that hasn't always happened. And so I feel that this local law that we have enacted, that the city has to comply with, has not only further highlighted some of the challenges we face, but it also is a call to action and attention. We have to do better on behalf of the city of New York, and we have to do better on behalf of all of the young adults, people of color, students of color that want to join the city workforce, that already see the barriers. We have to make it easier for them to become a part of our workforce.
How do you see COVID-19 playing into the city's, employment factor. A lot of people have definitely filed for unemployment. We know across the nation more now than ever before. Talk to us about how you see things playing out, particularly in the area of employment. We talk about the disparity in pay. You can talk about being hired. You can also talk about also the fact of, listen, I'm out here trying to get a job in a time when having a job is almost like, unheard of in some areas simply because COVID-19 has taken a lot of this away.
Yeah, it's been a real trying time for us in the Bronx. We've lost thousands of people to the pandemic. One in every four Bronx residents lost their job, lost their income and their revenue. Many have fallen behind in rent. The overall quality of life has really, really been a challenge. Access to quality and healthy food, basic necessities like a roof over your head have been a struggle for many families. And I don't lose sight of that ever. Every day I realize there are a lot of people out there that need help. That's why food pantry, soup kitchen lines are long. That's why I've worked with, Bronx EOC and VIP Community Services and others to host job fairs virtually. That's why I'm working with non-traditional employment for women on construction jobs for many of our females so they can come into an industry that's been male dominated. That's why we're still trying to do work remotely because we're not able to meet in person. We have to offer an opportunity for many of our residents to return to work. And even now with a potential second wave, potential closure of schools and non-essential services, it's going to be even more tough. And so I don't want people to give up. I want them to continue to look for work, continue to, work with small business services, Workforce One, the Business Solution Center, so many different organizations that are still doing work, but it's being done remotely, and find opportunities. There are jobs out there, but we know that it's challenging for the Bronx. We're back in double digits on unemployment. And so it's really, really a tough time. Joining the city's workforce is also a challenge right now because there is a hiring freeze. And during the pandemic, we had to deploy a number of different first responders, nurses, and doctors and medical professionals from elsewhere, from outside of New York State, to come into New York City to help us. So it has been a challenge, but I really believe that once we rebound and get out of this pandemic, we can return to whatever normal means, right? The new normal, and really
Right.
find a way to get people back to work.
As far as your district is concerned, you've got hospitals that are actually within your
Yep.
district that you're actually trying to deal with and making sure that they're adequately taken care of during this COVID-19. As these numbers are continuing to rise, what are you hearing from those who are working on the inside with boots on the ground as to what's going on inside now?
So it wasn't easy for our hospital workers. We represent Bronx Care. We've been doing a lot of work with health and hospitals with Gotham, Morrisania, and many other hospitals in the Bronx, North Central, Montefiore, St. Barnabas. And it was a challenging time. They were overburdened, overworked, understaffed, short-staffed, at capacity, not having enough PPE. And now that we've lowered the hospitalization rates by a tremendous amount, we're obviously very cautious of an increase on that. So every hospital has a certain amount of PPE that's already stored and placed in reserve just to make sure we have enough hospital gowns, face masks, hand sanitizers, N95s, and certain things that they need. But at some point, if we do see the numbers rising as they have, and if that continues on that trajectory, we're going to have to ask for more support. No question. A lot of the money that we've expended is FEMA reimbursable, but we're going to have to ask our partners in Albany and the federal government to help us. And right in our own district, we have an uptick in a number of zip codes on the west side in our district, in Highbridge and Morris Heights. And it's very scary. So we are actively working on PPE distributions, COVID rapid testing sites at parks, at different locations, because we need people to get tested, but we need people to also practice social distancing, wash their hands frequently, and wear your face mask. I know it's not comfortable, but it's what we have to do to stay healthy, to stay safe, and to stay alive. And this district took a big hit. We lost a lot of people. So we want to be very mindful. The holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas upon us. We know that we are just not the normal, folks that we were before. We can't do everything like we used to. So everything is going to have to change based on the COVID-19 world we're living in, and still trying to find some normalcy in all of that.
Yeah. Well, I got you here. I want to talk a little bit about the work that you do in the Public Safety Commission. A lot of New Yorkers, and particularly, well, not New Yorkers, I'll say New Yorkers and some community-based organizations have made their voices heard about really defunding the police, looking at how we're dealing with police issues right now. Given the fact of where we are right now, 2021, 2020, I should say, getting ready to enter into 2021, you've got boots on the ground on the inside track. Talk to me about that argument that's being made. How would you like to see things play out, particularly for the NYPD, because I know that your committee works very close with the work that goes on with law enforcement.
Yeah, so for 4 years, I chair public safety. I no longer chair the committee now, but I am still a member of the committee. A very, very tough time, a very tough summer. We had a rise in shootings and homicides, unfortunately. We had a movement for Black Lives Matter, recognizing that to be a Black man in America shouldn't be a death sentence. We saw police violence across the country, right here in our own city. We saw a lot happening, and we also faced a $9 billion budget deficit that we had to balance. So what ended up happening was there was a shift of $1 billion in expense funding to social services. It wasn't a blank check for $1 billion, but it had to go into the budget to balance it. So we were able to provide money for summer youth and Sonic, Compass, Beacon, Cornerstone programs. Fortunately, a lot of agencies took heavy cuts like sanitation and parks department. So there was garbage overflowing, parks weren't maintained, park staff. It was a lot. And I want to remind everyone, particularly constituents that reached out to me about feeling safe and wanting to see police in their neighborhood, we tried to find a balance. And so making sure that we don't have an impact on deployment, on response time, so that if there's an emergency, you can still get to someone in distress in a timely fashion, persons in need of emotional disturbances and lots of things that we try to make sure are still addressed. But at the same time, looking at what public safety looks like, the future of public safety, redefining public safety, the crisis management system, the anti-gun violence organizations on the ground, Guns Down, Life Up, BRAG, Bronx Rising Against Gun Violence, SOS, RTG, Release the Grip. These are organizations that are on the ground that provide services around healthcare, mental health, therapeutic services. They have mobile units, they give jobs, they mentor kids. They do a lot on the ground, and they are a part of the conversation as well. And so we have to get out of this position of expecting police to respond to everything. They are not the problem solvers of poverty and underemployment and lack of health care and unstable housing, but yet they respond to everything. And that's not fair to cops, and it's not fair to us. But I feel like there's a role for everyone, and there is a role for NYPD and the work they do every day. But it's not just the reliance on NYPD for everything. And so that's what we're trying to do, and we're not there yet. Right? You can't enact change and reform in one budget. It has to be policy, it has to be legislation, it has to be changing the mindset of what we believe public safety is all about in our city.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, and literally a couple of minutes before we close out. I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about what you will be doing in your district as we get ready to end this year called 2020.
Sure. So our council district, District 16, Claremont, Concourse Village, Highbridge, Mount Eden, Morris Heights, and Morrisania. We are actively working on PPE distributions throughout the district. We are promoting all of our active COVID-19 rapid testing sites at Gotham, Morrisania, Mullally Park, 1302 EL Grant. We're also doing a number of food distributions of fresh groceries and produce and canned goods. We've been giving out and will continue to give out turkeys to many of our tenant leaders at NYCHA, our homeowners, our residents that live in our co-ops. We're working closely with many of our civic leaders, the community boards. It is important for us to make sure that you see our office all the time, no matter whether it's an election or not, giving out food, giving out face masks, hand sanitizers, because it's important to make sure you understand that you are not alone. Our office is always here to help you. 718-588-7500. We're at 1377 Jerome Avenue at the corner of 170th Street. And our email address is district16 Bronx at council.nyc.gov. And most importantly, community, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of you and your family. We are all in this together. And during the season of Thanksgiving, we are grateful for every day we have. God bless you all. Stay safe, and happy season of Thanksgiving to each and every one of you across our district.
Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being with us. Continue to do the great work and let us know what's going on in your area as we continue to let Bronxites know all the things that are happening in District 16 as well as across New York City. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Daren. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson, our guest here on the Social Justice Forums. Want you to stay with us. We're going to be talking about doulas as well as student loan debt relief, a possibility coming up in 2021. That's next on the Social Justice Forums.